I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply asked a few questions no one expected me to ask. The room was warm, the tree was lit, and my daughter was smiling in that careful way children do, when they sense tension they can't name yet. My parents laughed it off, said I was overreacting, said it was just a gift, generous, harmless, loving. But gifts have histories. And boundaries matter most when everyone pretends they don't. I noticed the account setup, the permissions, the timing. I remembered conversations that were never resolved and promises that were quietly ignored. While they poured drinks and waited for me to calm down, I stepped into the hallway and made a call that followed the rules they thought didn't apply to family. I didn't do it to punish them. I did it to protect what was mine. And if you're wondering why I stayed so calm, wait until you understand what that phone really meant. Christmas at my parents' house had always followed the same rhythm. The same music playing softly in the background, the same heavy dishes brought out only once a year, the same carefully arranged version of togetherness. It looked warm from the outside. It usually was, if you didn't look too closely. Since my divorce, those gatherings had taken on a different texture. My parents were generous in ways that felt pointed, helpful in ways that bypassed me. They loved my daughter fiercely, and I never doubted that. But love, when mixed with control, can blur into something else. I was raising her on my own. Quiet mornings, packed lunches, bedtime routines that never changed. I worked hard to keep her life steady, predictable, safe. I explained rules carefully. Privacy, boundaries, age-appropriate trust. My parents nodded when I talked about those things. They always nodded. That morning, my daughter woke up early, as children do on Christmas, and padded into the living room in her socks. The tree lights reflected in her eyes as she tore through wrapping paper. Pajamas, books, a soft sweater from me. Then the last box, larger, heavier, my mother's handwriting on the tag. She opened it slowly. The iPhone caught the light immediately. New. Expensive. My father watched her face with satisfaction. My mother clasped her hands together, smiling too widely. I didn't react right away. I asked how long they'd had it. My mother waved her hand. Oh, we took care of everything. It's all set up. That was the first crack. I picked up the phone and felt its weight. I noticed the screen was already active, a passcode in place. An account logged in that wasn't mine. My daughter looked between us, uncertain now, joy dimming into confusion. It's just for emergencies, my father said quickly. And so we can FaceTime her whenever she wants. Whenever she wants. I asked if they'd discussed it with me first. My mother's smile tightened. We didn't think we needed permission to give our granddaughter a gift. I didn't argue. I sat there, listening as they justified it. How times had changed, how other kids had phones, how I was being overly cautious. The familiar tone crept in, the one that suggested I was difficult, controlling, dramatic. It was subtle. It always was. I went through the settings quietly. Location sharing enabled, contacts already added, restrictions disabled. My name wasn't listed anywhere. My daughter's voice was small when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head and kissed her hair. "No, sweetheart." But something was wrong. I remembered past conversations, how my parents showed up unannounced, how they shared photos of her online after I'd asked them not to, how my boundaries were treated as suggestions. I'd let things slide for the sake of peace. For family. For Christmas mornings just like this one. I stood up and walked into the hallway, phone still in my hand. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. Clear. Behind me. I could hear my mother telling my daughter it was fine, that mommy just needed a minute. I looked down at the screen one more time. Then I made the call. And as the line rang, I realized this wasn't about a phone at all. It was about how far they thought they could go without ever asking me. The operator's voice was calm, professional. I spoke the same way. I didn't accuse anyone of harm. I described the situation exactly as it was: a minor, a device registered to someone else, parental consent not given. I answered questions. I followed instructions. When I hung up, Nothing about the house felt the same. My mother was waiting for me in the hallway, her expression tight with disbelief. "Did you really just call the police?" she asked, as if volume might make the answer change. "Yes," I said. "My father joined us," his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You're humiliating us over a phone." I looked past them toward the living room, where my daughter sat quietly on the couch, hands folded in her lap, the unopened wrapping paper at her feet. "I'm not humiliating anyone," I said. "I'm protecting my child." They started talking at once, about intentions, about love, about how I was turning something joyful into a problem. I listened without interrupting. I'd done this enough times to recognize the pattern. When they were uncomfortable, they reframed. When I held firm, they escalated. "This is what happens when you shut people out," my mother said sharply. "You overreact." I didn't respond. I went back into the living room and sat beside my daughter, explaining gently that the phone needed to stay with me for now. She nodded, trusting me in the way only children still can. That trust settled something inside me. Whatever came next, I could live with it. The knock at the door came sooner than I expected. 2 officers stood outside, polite and neutral. My parents stiffened immediately. My mother tried to laugh it off, said it was a misunderstanding. The officers asked to see the phone. I handed it over. They asked who purchased it. My father answered. They asked whose account it was registered under. My mother hesitated before admitting it was hers. They asked if I had given consent for the device to be given to my minor child. "No," I said. The questions continued, procedural and calm. The answers painted a picture my parents hadn't anticipated. Nothing dramatic happened. No handcuffs. No raised voices. Just documentation. The officers explained next steps, recommended transferring ownership properly, advised on parental consent laws. They were respectful, clear. They handed the phone back to me, not to my parents. When they left, the house was silent. My mother sank into a chair, stunned. "I can't believe you'd do this to us," she said quietly. I looked at her then, not with anger, but with something closer to resolve. "You did this to yourselves," I replied. "You went around me." My father stood rigid, jaw clenched. "We were trying to help." "Help doesn't erase authority," I said. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. Food went untouched. Decorations felt excessive. I packed our things while my parents watched, unsure how to respond now that the rules had been stated out loud by someone other than me. As we stepped outside into the cold, my daughter squeezed my hand. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "We're safe." Behind us, the door closed. I didn't know what would happen next. What stories would be told, what lines would be crossed or finally respected. But as I buckled my daughter into the car and felt the quiet settle around us, I knew one thing with certainty. They would never mistake my silence for permission again. The days after Christmas felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful, careful. My parents didn't call. They sent one text, brief and stiff, asking if my daughter was okay. I replied that she was fine. Nothing more. I wasn't interested in reopening a conversation that had never truly closed to begin with. At home, life returned to its rhythm. School mornings, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories read in the same chair every night. My daughter asked about the phone once, then let it go. Children are remarkably good at accepting boundaries when they're explained without fear. I, on the other hand, felt the weight of what had shifted. Growing up, my parents had always decided first and explained later. They framed it as experience, as knowing better. When I became a mother myself, that instinct didn't disappear. It simply redirected. What unsettled them wasn't the phone. It was that I had drawn a line they couldn't step over. A week later, my mother finally called. Her voice was subdued, wounded in a way that felt practiced. She said she'd been thinking a lot. She said they'd only wanted to give my daughter something special. She said involving the police was extreme. I listened. When she finished, I said calmly, "You created a situation where I had to involve someone neutral." She sighed, frustrated. You didn't trust us? I trusted you with boundaries? I replied. You ignored them. Silence followed. Not angry silence, processing silence. I didn't rush to fill it. That was new too. At work, I noticed how much easier things felt when rules were respected without argument. Forms signed. Permissions granted properly. Clear authority acknowledged. It struck me how often, in families, we resist the same structure we accept everywhere else. Another envelope arrived in the mail. Documentation related to the phone. Ownership transfers, account access. I completed everything methodically, making sure the device was fully removed from my parents' control. It wasn't about punishment, it was about clarity.